Welcome everyone. Developer Student Clubs presents Android Study Jam session. Hello, this is Janvi Karya, DSC lead of AIKTC. We are super glad to have you all here. This session is brought to you by 7 DSC leads across India, namely DSC VJTI led by Palak Mantri, DSC AUC led by Sri Lasya, DSC UMIT led by Sakshi Grover, DSC RAIT led by Vaishnavi Dwivedi, DSC AIKTC led by myself, Janvi Karya, DSC UIET led by Monica Rajput, and DSC IGTT UW led by Sangeeta Jha. We have come together to host a panel discussion and an expert speaker session for you to learn from the best minds in the field of mobile app development. At the expert talk session with Chintan Parmar sir, you will be getting familiar with the best industry practices and job types for Android development. And at our panel discussion with Ishaan Sharma and Jaydeep Singh Parmar, sorry, you get to understand the difference between cross-platform options and native Android, publishing apps on the Play Store, and aspects of app search optimization. So, without further ado, let's dive deep into it. So, for panel discussion, I'll call upon Vrithi to go ahead with the panel discussion. Over to you, Vrithi.
Thank you, Janvi. A very good evening to all. My name is Riddhi Gupta and I am pursuing BTech in IT from VJTI and currently in second year. Welcome to the expert talk on Android study jams. I am glad to be a host for today's panel discussion. For today's panel discussion, we have with us Jaydeep Singh Parmar and Ishaan Sharma. Our first panelist is Jaydeep Sierra. He is a DSc lead for A.D. Patel Institute of Technology, where he is pursuing BE in Computer Engineering. He is skilled in Express.js, Firebase, Node.js, Java, and Android development, and is an Android developer from the past 2 years. Till now, he has published 8 apps on Google Play Store, and not only this, he has 10, 100k, 10k, 5k downloads on his apps. Some of his apps include food ordering app, doubts forum, dating app, and many more. Our next panelist is Ishaan. He is a web developer, app developer, and a part-time UI UX designer. He mostly works with cross-platform technologies like Flutter. In fact, he was also a runner-up in Hack 20 Flutter Hackathon by Google. He is also the founder of Flutter Chandigarh and is currently working as an intern at Pushstack. Now, let us get started with the session. So, let us come to the first question. What is the basic roadmap to build an application, and how is the process different for Flutter and Kotlin? Would you like to start, Ishan?
Oh, yeah, sure. Whenever someone is thinking of an idea to build an app, I would say, first of all, you should follow a few things. First of all, it's defining your goals. Like, what are your business objectives? What is your target audience? What kind of people you want to reach and what problem it solves. And basically, how your app is different from others. Like, what's your unique selling point or USP? There are tons of millions of apps on the Play Store and all. So why would I prefer to download your app over others? And next up is sketching up and building wireframes for that idea that you have. Once you build a wireframe or a UI, a basic UI, then you will get an idea like how to improve and which services to add on and tons of stuff like that. And afterwards comes the most important part of choosing a development framework. Like there are so many frameworks. You can either go native with Android, Kotlin, Java, or you can use like Objective C and Swift for iOS, or otherwise you can use Xamarin, Flutter, React Native, or other technologies. So deciding which one is the best for you, it totally depends upon your context, and deciding which one is the best for you and which one you should choose, that's very essential. And afterwards, you can just go into development. Yeah.
That was an insightful answer. I'm sure this will help students who are willing to start with application development. Jaideep, your turn to take up the question now.
Okay, like what Ishan said in the first, was definitely you should follow it, but it was a bit related to also the business perspective. But if we talk from the developer's perspective, then developers don't think a lot about from the business side. They only think about from the developer side. So like what a developer like roadmap will be, first of all, like someone will give him an app. What he will design is he will design that, okay, so I have this app, I have these screens. So first of all, we will be designing screens in like any software you can take, like Adobe XD or Figma. Then like I will be specifically talking for native Android. Then the developer will be converting those wireframes you called into the XML. And like we all know, it's very easy to do it in XML. And then he will just write the business logic inside the with the help of Java or Kotlin. Like that will be what the roadmap I follow.
Thank you, Jaydeep. Those were some valuable points and inputs. So, moving on to the next question. This question is for you, Ishaan. So, a lot of beginners face this problem of like choosing where to start with app development, given the many ways like Kotlin, Flutter, and many cross-platform frameworks like React Native, etc. So, what is your advice to help them get started?
Yep, sure. Whenever you are making an app, it could be daunting at first to decide from all the different options that are out there for a mobile app framework, and that makes choosing the frameworks really hard. It's not easy, and there's lots of information out there on the internet that can either lead you down to a good path or a bad one. And on top of that, there are lots of other factors to take into consideration, like time to market, development tools, costs, hiring, maintenance costs, and performance features, and other third-party risks, which I would say like big uh, is a big factor for me, the third-party risk. So now let's explore our options. On the one side, we have first-party native apps, and these are the tools which are built by the creators of the operating systems. Like for Android, you have Kotlin and Java, and for iOS, you have Objective C and Swift. These are really high performant because you can directly take advantage of the different APIs that are available natively and the whole UI UX. Although to make your app available on both the platforms, you will have to maintain two separate projects. And once you're adding a feature to one of the apps, you will have to work on the other project as well. So I would say it mainly depends upon your context. Let's say you have created a website with Vue or React or Angular, and your app does not require that many features, then PWA seems like a good option to me. And now, in case you want to create an AR/VR app that takes advantage of AR Core, AR Kit, or lots of other native APIs, then you should definitely go with native development. Yep.
Ishaan, that was really an helpful answer. It will surely help other students to decide properly instead of like any confusion. So moving on to our next question. Now that the Android Studio Study Jam series has come to an end, keeping in mind the upcoming solution challenge. So what are the next steps that the audience could take after Android Study Jams according to you? I would like Jaydeep to answer this question for us.
Okay, so after this Android study jam is over, like definitely you won't have learned the whole Android platform with just the Android study jams. So what you could do is you can take a look into the Android documentation. But like let me just tell you straightforward, for a beginner, the native Android documentation is pretty tough to like grab the concepts. So what you can do is you can first of all go with the code labs which are provided by Google. They're really amazing. It will help you to like clear your concepts. And if you're still facing problems, you can go to YouTube, and there are like 2 to 3 best channels on YouTube, like which I follow personally from the past few years. Number one is Coding in Flow. You can just search for Coding in Flow. It is the best channel you can find on like YouTube for Android. But like most of his content, like a lot of content was in Java, but previously he has been uploading a lot of content on architectures, how you can use some libraries on with the help of the Kotlin. So you can search for that. Now, the second is Philip Lackner. You can just search for it, and it is also a pretty good channel for Android. These two are the best. Like you will be able to learn new concepts and projects also. But if you want to just take big projects, then you can search for Coding Cafe. And this guy has a lot of projects on his YouTube channel. Like if you will just go, he has developed Uber clone, WhatsApp clone, Instagram clone, whatever clone you can imagine. This guy has developed in not only native Android, but also in Flutter. So like if you want to just practice it, you can just go to coding cafe. And apart from this, if you guys ever want to learn new topic and you don't want to watch videos on the YouTube, then what you can do is just go to Google and like type Medium after every topic, because the articles written on the Medium are like pretty great, and like you will also save time by not watching the videos, because the videos are sometimes very big, and you can just save time by reading the articles. So these are the few things you can do after Android Study Jams is over.
Actually, when I referred coding in Flow when I was learning Android Studio, so that was a really helpful suggestion. It's always nice
Yes.
to have the perspective of an expert. So now coming to the next question. Jaydeep, you have published quite a few apps on Google Play Store. So would you mind sharing how you went about it and the process of publishing apps?
Okay, so when I first developed the application, the very first question in mind was like, how should I take this app and publish it in the Play Store? On searching, like I just came to know that you just need to, first of all, you need to pay $25 to Google, and that's just a lifetime fee. Like in comparison with Apple, Apple takes $100 every year, but Google only takes $25, and you can upload unlimited number of apps on Play Store with the help of your account. And then after, it's a pretty simple thing. Once your app is developed, you just need to generate the signed APK, or you need to generate an app bundle. You should generate app bundle because it is less in size in comparison with the APK. But in generating the both, you need to generate an app signing key, and this is the most important part of the whole publishing the application to the Play Store, guys, because this app signing key will be used by the Play console to identify your app when next time you will update it. So like when next time you will publish the version 2 of the application, then you need to use the same APK key, like the same app signing key which you used in the version 1. Like if you will not use the same app signing key, Google will clearly reject your application. And like you should just save this key like very safely, email it to yourself, save it in a drive, save it everywhere, because you don't want to lose this key. And you only need to generate one app signing key, guys. Like the one of the biggest mistakes I did was I generated like till 3 to 4 applications. I was generating new signing key for every app. But like you don't need to do it like this. You can use the same signing key for every application, and that will be easy to maintain. And just in case, if you ever like lost your app signing key, you can request to the Google support team. They will provide you with the one, but like you can only do it once. So just keep this in mind and play very safely. You never want to lose your app signing key, because if you lose it, you cannot update your app in the future.
Thank you, Jaydeep. That was a great explanation from your side, and I think everyone will keep this in mind to keep their app signing key safe. And also, would you mind sharing how to go about app search optimization?
Okay, app search optimization, it's like completely up to you. If you want to grow your app on the Play Store, then these are the few tips that you can follow for like rank your application on the Play Store. So there are two main factors. It's on metadata factors and off metadata factors. Like on metadata factors, guys, just include like few things like your title, short description, long description. Like you should try to include the keyword. So like for example, you are developing a wallpaper application. First of all, what you should do is just search on the Play Store wallpaper, and then just search what your competitor is doing, and then just take in some 2 to 3 main keywords and try to use those keywords in your title, in your short description, and in your long description. This will help you in ranking your application. Plus, apart from this, guys, there is just like one very interesting thing. If you just change your this package ID, for example, every app has a package, com.package. Whatever name it will be, like it doesn't affect directly, but 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, if you search for Zara on the Play Store, then Super Mario was ranked at like at top of it. And like on searching why this application, then some predicted that Super Mario package name was containing com.nintendo.zara. Like this can be the reason why it was ranked, but you should try it out. If you don't have any constraints in setting up the package ID, then you should definitely play around with just take any keyword and keep it inside the package ID. It can help you grow your app faster on the Play Store. Plus, apart from this, recently I have noticed that, 2 to 3 months ago, I published one application, and in the 24 hours, it got zero downloads. So like after 6 months, it started growing. But recently, only a few days ago, I published one application, like also shared it with some of my friends, and in 24 hours, that app almost crossed 200 to 300 downloads, and that app was like almost ranked at first number with the help of the keyword. So if you are able to get more installs just in 24 hours, then Google will rank your app higher. Like if you are getting more installs, like you can just follow these tips to get more installs on the Play Store.
Yeah, that was actually a great tip. Like that was very simple and knowledgeable explanation from your side, Jaydeep. So the next question is for Ishan. So Ishan, students have already worked with Flutter, have this doubt as to why they should learn Kotlin after learning Flutter. So would you like to throw some light on this?
Yep, absolutely. Actually, this is something that I recently faced while I was building a production app. See, the thing is, I love Flutter. I have been a Flutter advocate for over a year, and I even start my own community on Flutter, built on Flutter. But the thing is, after a certain point, after a certain stage, there is some limitation to Flutter. For example, like let's say I'm building an app like Instagram like app, and I'm creating a newsfeed. That's easy. But now once I want to like just have like there's these simple things like a photo view. There's this package in Flutter called photo underscore view, and when you have to zoom, like it just basically gives you access to these zoom controls and pan controls and all. And these are the things which you take granted on native side like Android or iOS. You just pass an image and it takes care of the rest. But on Flutter you have to rely on these third party packages, and there was sometimes like if there are sometimes while you're working on production it can be painful, because like these third party packages, these are open source, so like no one is getting any money to make these, and these are not first party, so like the code quality can't be at that level, the code that the Google is will write. So in those cases, you have to just rely on the package maintainer's mercy. Like I had this app with the gestures and all. There was this issue on different devices, and I had to wait for around 2 months till the package maintainer could write an update to that package. So I would say there's some limitation, but overall, in case you are if in case you are building a really simple app, like if the application is in a game, it's not much complex and doesn't require any deep platform integration. So in those simple apps, I would prefer using a cross-platform technology. And right now, at the moment, I'm leaning towards Flutter. So yeah.
That was an insightful answer. I had the same doubt when I started learning Kotlin through Android jams, and I'm sure this will clear the doubt for others also. So, moving on to the next. So, moving on to the backend, there are numerous options starting from Firebase to customizable backend options. What would you suggest to go with and why? Ishan, would you mind going first?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, Firebase is pretty interesting. Like Firebase, and for those who don't know, Firebase is basically a collection of backend services. Like there's Cloud Firestore, there's real-time database, and Firebase Analytics, and all those stuffs which you can use directly within your app. So you don't have to rely on backend hosting your own dedicated servers or something. So in those, like I would suggest, like if your project is just a prototype, like an MVP for an idea, or like you are building something for a hackathon or something, then Firebase is good. Or like in basically meaning if your user base is small, like let's say it's less than 100,000 users, then using Firebase is good. But once you scale it up, like once your user base is more than 500,000 or something, in those cases, Firebase becomes costly. It becomes expensive because like Firebase charge, like in Firebase, there's this service Cloud Firestore, and they charge you on on the basis of number of reads and writes. For every read and every write, they charge you, and that could grow up really quickly. So in those cases, having your own custom backend would actually be a sensible option. But again, it depends upon what you're building.
So that's great. Thank you, Ishaan. Jaydeep, would you like to add anything to this?
Like, yeah, Firebase is definitely expensive. Like, not only like Ishan said, till 500,000 users, but like I was just having 100 users daily, and my daily quota exhausted for the Firebase. Like, I don't know how, but just in a month it was just exhausting it. So at that time Firebase gets really very costly, and at that time you should feel like you should move to the backend. And in the backend also there are a lot of backend frameworks available that a beginner will get confused. So what my suggestion will be to like if you don't want to switch languages, for example, if you are using definitely you will be using Kotlin for native Android development, and if you don't want to learn any new language for backend development, then Kotlin has a backend framework called Ktor which you can learn. But still, if you want to learn new language, or if you already know new language, then you can go with JavaScript, in which Express Node and Express.js is pretty good and it's very easy. And if you know Python, you can go with Django or Flask. They are also very easy to learn. And like every language has its own backend framework, so which you can prefer.
So actually, this is always the confusion for many beginners and even developers. So this insight of yours will surely help them. So moving on to the next, Ishan, since you have been interested in UI and UX as well, would you mind throwing some light on how to boost up user engagement and how UI UX plays a key role in that? We would also love to know a few tips on how we could implement a great UI.
Sure. Actually, I have an example here on my screen. Can someone screen my screen? Just give me a second. Yep. So let's take this quick example. Let's assume that you have a bat and you have a ball. The bat and the ball together cost around 110 rupees, and the bat costs 100 rupees more than the ball. What would be the cost of the ball? A simple question. You can just write your answer down in the chat and just think for a minute, and then you can write one. Although like there's some lag here in the chat, so I will just skip this over, and you can see like the answer. Most of the people must be saying the answer is rupees 10. Now, this is not the correct answer. Why? Because the real answer is 5. Because of this, you can see the explanation here. Now, why this happened? You were forced to just write 10 as the answer because your mind works that way. Your mind just always tries to find a shortcut to any solution. And it's not that you don't know maths or I don't know math. It's just how our minds are used to work. So this is called behavioral psychology, and in this, whenever a user is using your app, everything should feel natural. And for example, I have this, like you all of you must have seen the floating action button, right? uh, but the round button. So whenever I'm using my phone with one hand and thumb, I'm always forced to, like, a natural flow is that I'm always forced to just push that button. Instead, if the button was on the left side, that would break the natural flow because I will have to stretch my thumb. So there are these key points which happen, which you have to take account when you're building an app, and they can actually have a big impact on your user engagement experience. You for To drive up these user engagements, you can use tools like Firebase Analytics or some custom analytics to check like how many times a user is tapping on a certain action or going to a certain service, and you custom your UI on the basis of that. And see, most of the startups that make these apps nowadays, the part where they lack is basically the UI. It's not just about creating a product or building a service or something. It's more about creating an overall experience. Like if Uber is giving taxis, then Ola is also doing the same. Or if Zomato is offering food delivery service, Swiggy is also offering the same. Where they differ is the experience the user gets once you book an order or place an order or something else. So that is what you as developers need to focus on, because once a user is, let's say, addicted to the user experience that you provide, he will never go back. He or she will never go back to any other app. So please take into account, and to emphasize, like to create these UIs and all, there are two things. First of all, there's UI, which is how your app looks and feels, and the second is user experience. It's not always the case that what looks good is always like what actually looks good in terms of UI is actually good for user experience. So you can use tools like XD, Figma, and you can explore some illustrations on Dribble or some other concepts, I mean, on some other amazing platforms. And yep, that is pretty much how you can drive up your user engagement, I would say.
Even I use Figma sometimes for UI, and that was an interesting answer. A good and professional UI actually makes user more interested in your app. That's actually true. So moving on to the last question. What are some of the mistakes that you made while coming so far in the journey of app development? What are the few things that you learned the hard way or you thought you had known before? So let's go with Jaydeep first.
Okay, so talking about my experience in the mistakes that I mostly did was like, when you go on to YouTube, then YouTube will just give you so many tutorials that first you will get confused. And even if you start watching a tutorial and then follow, but then also after you will get confused that what topic should I pick next or what topic should I learn. Like this is one of my experience which I was facing. Like I was just learning topics like really in any order. For example, today I'm learning about video players. Yesterday I'm learning about recycler view, and some another day I'm learning about some another widget. And like this is not the order you should follow. Like you should start by developing small projects to the build projects that to the big projects. That's what I think. And another thing that you should do is start by developing small projects, like that's you can do. But another thing that you should never do is just follow some of the tutorials, because what they will do is they will just try to say you that these are the best practices in the industry. Some YouTubers are telling that Mvvm is the best architecture, some are telling that MVP is the best architecture. And for a beginner, like you will first of all, for a beginner, you should never focus on the architecture. You should only focus on the coding part. As long as you're enjoying the coding, you should not worry about this architecture. You should worry when your projects get bigger. If you're just if you're just doing it from the learning purpose, then you should never worry about these things. And another thing that, like, I don't know if I'm even facing it, but Android depreciates things very faster. For example, the moment I learned async task, the next day I came to know that it's depreciated. The moment I learned something new, the next day I came to know that they have also depreciated these things. And like this is, I don't know, this is the problem with the Android. That's definitely not, but this is like, you should keep that in mind that in Android, nothing is permanent. For example, Google is even planning to release Jetpack Compose, which is still in the alpha stage, but once it is launched into the beta or the final stage, then you can just say that the whole designing in the Android part will be completely changed. It will be really easy for Flutter developers to move on to native Android with the help of Jetpack Compose. So these are the few things.
I had this doubt regarding Android Studio. Like I have faced it myself. In my old laptop, the RAM was actually very less, so Android Studio was like it keeps on hanging. And so, what about the students who use like old laptops which have comparatively less speed? So, what
Okay,
about them? Is there
uh,
any other? Yeah.
as long as you are like people say that you need i5 or i7 to run Android Studio, like definitely you should have. But even if you don't have, then i5 with 8 GB RAM will be sufficient to run your Android projects. Because when I started like 2 to 3 years back, I started with i3 and 4 GB RAM. but 4 GB RAM will lag a bit in Android Studio. Like maybe you should try to extend it to 8 GB. But i3 and 8 GB should be running perfectly. And the next thing is, don't use emulators. Now people use emulators, but it just, it will hang up your whole system. Just try using external, like using some softwares like Visor. Emulators, like
Yes,
it just takes a lot of space.
yes, exactly. It actually slows down the entire laptop itself if you start emulator.
Yes.
So that thank you for your advice and suggestions. I think this will indeed help us in avoiding such mistakes in future. So, like coming to the end of the panel discussion, thank you so much, Ishaan and Jaydeep, for taking your time out and sharing your experience with us today. I had a great time hosting both of you. I hope the audience gained a lot of valuable inputs from the session. So now I would now request Janvi to take over. Thank you. Over to you, Janvi.
Okay, actually, there's a question also pinned to the screen.
Uh,
How to make my own apps? Like I usually refer some other sources while developing, but how can we really make our own? Unlike competitive for app development, I am totally dependent on resources. Yep. Can I take this one?
yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so actually, this is something that I faced a few months ago. This thing is called a tutorial hell, where like I was constantly just watching the videos on YouTube on how to build something, how to create a Uber clone, how to create a Mars weather app or something like that. So the thing is like it gives you confidence. It helps boost your confidence. These tutorials that okay, now I can actually build something, but actually in reality they don't boost your confidence. Like for example, you always once you are addicted of this tutorial hell, you will always need someone to guide you on how to build something. You won't even be able to build a simple to do or calculator app. So in those cases, I will say, let's take it a step back. You don't have to learn to code. That's not like actually. This is just my personal opinion. So I believe that as a computer science student, our main motive is not to learn. Our main motive and main goal is not to learn how to code or like how to build apps or how to build websites. No, as a computer science student, our main motive or main goal should be to create products, to create real world solutions to real world problems. For example, let's take the example of an ATM. I am sure whether you or Jerry must have always, like, at least once in your life, visited an ATM or something, right? You just put in
Yeah,
a debit card or credit card and you get the money.
yeah,
Now, how does that happen? And this ATM, like this one that we are talking about, there are millions of these throughout the world, and millions of transactions takes place every day, amounting to around billions of dollars in a day. So how does this all happens? This happens because there were people like you or people like in the audience or me who were sitting behind these displays and these screens and who wrote some scripts to actually make it work. Does it really matter which language they used, whether it was Cobalt or Java, C++, or Golang or something else? Until another and at the end of the day it solves the real world problem, and that's the impact that it has. So don't just think about like I really have to learn app development, I have to learn this to get a job. No, getting a job is really easy. The main purpose is to come up with these solutions. Just try to think of any problem that you have. For example, I would say an example of could be if your mom asks you about beta aaj khane mein kya banao, or son what should I cook for dinner today. So in those cases, why not apply computer science? Like why not think of something like having a Raspberry Pi or a camera in your fridge basket, and then using machine learning to detect which fruits and vegetables are there, and then you can use an API, basically Adam an API, to generate the different types of recipes that you can create from those fruits and vegetables. Now that's a real problem, and you have just created a solution for that. That will drive you up to actually learn something. That will encourage you and make you more curious. But creating an app is easy. You can just always Google that up and just like we all do Stack Overflow all the time. I have been a web developer for around 8 years, and I still Stack Overflow basic CSS stuff every time. So, yep, that's what I would like to do to it. Yeah.
That was actually a great answer. Here is the next question. I am learning Kotlin for app development. Is Java needed at some point while making apps? Like,
Okay, so I would like to answer this question. Like,
yes,
if you take a look at this, like Indian market, then like we don't want to move forward. Like maximum of the Indian IT companies are still using PHP as their backend. Like I don't understand why, but still they are stuck on PHP. Like there are just so much jobs, and not only regarding the backend. Whenever I'm applying for internships, also like Kotlin. Google announced Kotlin as the official language, I think in 2017. But still, like in 2021, also like companies don't want to move forward. Like especially Indian companies. Like in foreign, they are moving at a very faster rate. But in India, companies will not move. Like in 2021, also like I'm like I haven't completed an internship, but I have joined them and leave after because due to some external reason. But all of the companies are still using Java as their code base. Like none of them is like ready to move to Kotlin. I don't know why big companies are moving, but these small IT companies, like they still want to do with Java. So like if you want to work for some big company like big company, then you should definitely know Kotlin. If you're learning Android development in 2021, start with Kotlin only. But if you will be interning at some company and it's a small company, then it will be good if you know Java. And I think Java is like in like every college in 4 years you have been taught Java. You will be taught Java. So should be necessary, but maybe 2 to 3 years after, I hope Indian companies move to Kotlin because they still are not ready to move to Kotlin. They just want to use Java. You should learn Java, but your first priority should always be Kotlin.
yeah, that's actually true. Even I heard that Kotlin is now being used by most of the big companies as their code base. So I think we
No,
should wrap it.
even if you
Yeah,
like take a look at the code base of the Signal, then it's completely in Java. Like a lot of people were like in a discussion in the Twitter that why it's still in Java, but it's companies based. Like even we don't know why it's in Java. So, like even if these big companies are using this Java and still not moving to Kotlin, then like and we don't know. But if you're learning Android development, then definitely like keep your priority as Kotlin. And if you have
yeah.
time, then definitely learn Java.
Yeah, correct. That's true. Now I think we should wrap up this panel discussion. So I would again like to thank you, Ishaan and Jaydeep, for taking your time out and giving us so many tips and so many information about Android development. I'm sure this will help beginners who are about to start with Android development or those who have already started with it. So now I would now request Janvi to take over. So thank you very much, and over to you, Janvi.
Bye, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
So, thank you, Vridhi. Coming up next is the speaker session with Chintan Parmar sir. He is an Android developer and organizer of Kotlin Mumbai. He has worked with Cash Cow fintech startup, building the systems from the ground up. He then worked as an Android developer at Apk Mobile, developing fintech applications for HDFC and Mintalk platforms. He is currently working as an Android developer at Isaac app. Glad to have you here, sir. Over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. So, as Janvi gave the nice introduction about me, so yes, I do. I am doing Android development like since last 3 years, and as like everyone, I have started with my basics, and so today, like whatever I have learned in 3 years about things which I have experienced while development and moving to different companies and work cultures and everything, and after even being a part of my like organizing community, which is JetBrains official community, which is Kotlin Mumbai. So some things which I have learned, and like when you start with the application development, like whenever you start with like basics of your app, since you are all going through this Android study jam, and you are all starting with your app development journey. So what it would be like, since you are now and you would be working some maybe in a startup or maybe in some big companies like Zomato, Swiggy, or anything. So what exactly changes in your development cycle? That is all which I wanted to talk today with you, and want to share about all the stuff which I have experienced and learned throughout this journey. So yeah, let's get started with today's presentation. Uh, so today, like I am going to take you to the journey like from building a Hello World app to the real world application. It's like a guide to a professional or an industrial level app development session. So this is what I am going to guide you all. So whenever you are starting with a simple application, basically you are learning or maybe referring some tutorials or reading some documentation or any articles, anything you are starting with. So what you do is you begin with the very basics, like about the classes as in Android. If you have started, you would be knowing like, okay, what are activities, what are XML layout, how do you inflate a layout. So this all things which you might be already knowing, and as you grow up in your journey, you will start implementing new things. But what would be the perfect structure of your application, or maybe what would be the perfect user experience in case if you are releasing your app to at the Play Store, and how would you going with it? So let's discuss something about how does the Hello World app scales to the real world application, or how do you build an application which is already like industrial or an enterprise application. So like whenever you go for an interview, or maybe or whenever you start freelancing or anything, you would be able to show your client or your interviewer that, okay, this is the thing which I have done in my app development, and that would be really impressive for them as well. So the first thing, here, like, you are here for two reasons. You are already a developer, and second, you want to be a better developer. So how do we get there, being a better developer? So first thing, what I noticed, like when we develop the application, uh, like whenever we start with our application, or maybe we are building some personal application, or some application for our college or anything, like a final year project. So how what we do is we follow the waterfall model. So waterfall model, you might have already studied in your syllabus. So what it does is you collect requirement, you then do a design, you then do development, and then testing and maintenance. So this is like one at a go. Like you start with requirement and you end with maintenance. So if you have your stakeholders, like if I define stakeholders in your college, so it might be your faculty who are handling this thing, like who are guiding towards your project, or maybe your externals who are supposed to come at your college and check your project, like how you have worked on it, etc. So they are the stakeholders in your this scenario. Now consider what happens when you meet your stakeholders for the first time. You give them your synopsis. Okay, sir or ma'am, I'm doing this, and you show them this is your project structure, and you will going to follow this all things. And once they approve, you start with the designing. You refer some uh, UI platform like Dribble, or maybe you take help of your classmate in designing. Then you start with the development, then you do a basic round of testing, but which would be eventually manual testing. Then you go for the deployment, and then in case if you are supposed to like deliver a project to your college, or maybe you want to improve it, you will do into maintenance. So you see the stakeholders involvement as either at start or in the end. But while coming to the professional app journey, we follow the agile methodology. So in agile model, what exactly happened is like whenever something or any small changes is taking place in any of the stage or phase, the stakeholders are involved. Like first we gather the requirements. So in agile methodology, as in company, what we have different roles. So in a startup, maybe you don't have that much different roles. There would be a single person who would be handling product and who would be also handling project management. There would be a developer who would be handling like UI designing and also doing the Android development. So it can be possible in startup, but in big companies, what happens? They have their product manager, they have their project manager, so they get some requirement from the business. Okay, we want this feature. So then that feature requirement goes with the product manager. Product manager will share that with the stakeholders, which can be CEO or CTO or chief product manager, anyone. Then they will approve it. Once it gets approved, it comes to the design part. Now since the design part is done by the UI designer, so they will go through the understanding of user interface. They will go to the understanding of user experience, like what and which segment we are focusing on, and then they will design a wireframe or maybe UI toolkit kind of thing, and then they would be giving to the product manager. Now again, product manager will go back to the stakeholders and will get it approved. In case any changes required, it will again come back to the design phase. So what you see is like it goes in round and round. So like requirement comes, you develop the design, then you do a development, then you do a testing, and then you review a code, and then it gets deployed. So at every point, the user or stakeholders are involved. Like in case if we follow agile methodology in our application, like I'm building a like application like a to-do app for my users. So what I will do is before starting my app, I will go with like go to my user, or maybe I will roll out a form like a Google form, and I will ask them, okay, what are the requirements you needed? So suppose my to-do application is for like housewives. So how they will require? So they will have a separate requirement. If my to-do app is for like work from home people, they will have a different requirement. So that requirement will come to me. Then I will work on the design part. Then I will go back to them and I will show them, okay, this is the design. Are you guys happy? If they say yes, then I will move to the development part. So this is how the methodology differs when you are making your personal application or maybe your basic small application, and when you are working with a corporate or enterprise level application. So this thing is differing in case of both of them. So this is the life cycle which we follow in making a hello world app, and we follow in making a enterprise or industrial level application. In case anything comes up to your mind, or you get some doubt or anything you want to ask, you can put it in your comment or chat section, and I will address your queries like once we are done with the explaining and talk all about things. So this is the methodology which we are following now. So as in creation of technology, like building an application, first is like what are the things which we covered in agile phase. Is first phase is requirement, second is design, then it is development. So in requirement there is a famous quotation which is says like walking on water and developing software from a specification are easy if both are frozen. Like sometimes it happens like you don't have a clear picture of the requirement. So what you do is you start with making the application, then you realize at some point of time, okay, this is not going well. Then either you switch to the starting of the project, or you just skip the project. Like many times it happens like we decide or maybe some of our friends or maybe a relative says, okay, how about designing this application, and you get excited and you just start with the designing and developing the application, but then you realize, okay, this is not useful for the user segment I'm doing, or maybe the technology which I choose is not good for my development, and then you either skip the project or you just change everything. So it is good, like whenever you're starting with your project, like requirements should be like on paper and everything should be documented well. Okay, these are the features we are requiring, and we are supposed to use this technology and such that you have to keep everything. Second is design. Like every app is user friendly if you don't require tutorials and manual. Like you guys have already used WhatsApp from like many years. So whenever you install WhatsApp for the first time, WhatsApp never guides you like, okay, this is a chat button, or this is the button where you will record, or this is a button where you will do a voice call. They never did that, but they have designed their application so user friendly. Like even you might have noticed, like your mom or your dad or maybe any family member, they use WhatsApp, and even the kid who is just growing up, he also knows to reply or maybe use WhatsApp. So you can see that the segment they are covering is from like child to the old people. So this is the part where we should also focus, like designing the application, which should be like user friendly. Then it comes to the development. So this is a famous quote or maybe a meme. Like when I wrote this code, only God and I understood what I did. Now only God knows. So this might be, you have seen a meme on Instagram or Twitter, many places. So since we are a developer and we are into the main development phase, so what we should be focusing on, like if you see the requirement and design part may be handled by someone in your company when you start working, or maybe if you are working on your college project, maybe someone is handling that, or maybe you are just referring to some internet or articles to start your design and requirement. But development is the main part that you would be doing. So we should write such code. That code should be like whenever after 5 months, 6 months, or maybe after years, you should be able to understand what you had wrote at that time. Or maybe the your colleague or your peers who are working with you should be able to understand your code. So how do we do that? So first thing, whenever the development phase start, so as in my development journey, whenever I have been through a company, so what happens? Like whenever some features comes for the development, so I am required like to write some documentation. So what does that mean is, suppose your app is already built by some another developer, and you have been just hired, and now you have requested to do or maybe add some new feature. Like an example, if you consider uh, like Zomato application. Okay, so Zomato application, previously we had only food ordering app. Like you were able to do food orders, and you were able to see the nearby hotels and restaurants, etc. But since in the pandemic, they also added option to order groceries. So now, say suppose you are a developer who has been given the task to use the to build the development of the grocery module. So now, when you will start with grocery module, you you would be able to use certain features which are already built. Like suppose you have a list of restaurants, so you can use that list, you can use that data model maybe, and you can add your own list, like list of stores or maybe list of grocery items. So instead of recreating or rewriting the whole code base, what you can do is you can take some pieces of code from other module. So for that, you will require design documentation to convince your senior, or maybe to bring everything on paper, whatever in your mind is going on. Like suppose you have building this grocery feature, so what you will require, so you will say you will require an API which shares the list of nearby grocery stores. Then you will require the UI for showing the grocery items. Then you will be requiring some like tips from the business, like which all segment this people are you going to use, or maybe anything like that. So you will write it down everything, like okay, I will require those classes, I will require those UI, I will require those API, and then you will come up with the architecture. Generally what happens when you start with the application, or maybe whenever, like I am teaching an someone like how to build an app, so I won't directly teach them, okay, this is the architecture you have to follow. First of all, I will be showing them like this is the activity, this is the UI part, this is the uh, like API calling part, and this is the asynchronous function you do, etc. But I won't be jumping to the architecture, because architecture somewhere comes up once you have knowledge of all the uh, classes, functions, modules, everything in your project. So you should be using architecture from start. Like once you have learned building the application, like a basic application, even a to-do app or even a calculator app, even a codes application. So you should start with the architecture. The reason behind that is when you move to the industrial app, you would be seeing that they have used the architecture, and then somewhere you might get confused. Okay, what is this view model? Why is this observer here? What happens if I don't uh, initiate live data, etc. So this might come at that point. So it's better if you start with like small project, and whatever you are learning, you start implementing them. Then it would be a thumbs up for you guys. Then it comes the most important thing, which is clean code. Now, you might have even seen or maybe read about clean code many times, or like you have seen this word clean code, clean code. So, what does that clean code means? So, clean code is nothing. It's just like whatever you write as in code, it should be readable and understandable by human as well. So that is a clean code. We would be elaborating it in the next slide. So what is a clean code? So clean code is nothing, simple, readable, maintainable, tested, refactored, and the code which follows solid principles. Or maybe you can say your object oriented principles if you are building with the object oriented structure, maybe. So what is the simple thing means? So like simple in the sense like when you are writing a function or maybe declaring a variable, it should be very simple to understand. As in like if you are writing a function which calculates the two variables and returns some value, so you should be naming it simple, like calculate variables, something like that, or maybe get sum of variables. So something you would be very simple and easily understandable by other developers. Then it is readable. You might have seen many times, like if you're writing if condition, there are some people who would be uh, not following proper indentation. So they would what they would be doing, they would be keeping curly braces somewhere bottom, or maybe giving a tab or spacing, something like that. So instead of that, you should be following the good indentation practice. Like you should refactor your code once you have written. So in Android Studio, you have this option where you can just press Control Alt and it would be automatically structuring your code. So that is the thing. Then it is maintainable. Like once you are writing a code, the code should be eventually be such that like whenever you want to implement a new feature or maybe you want to add on something, you don't have to restructure or refactor all the code. You just have to refactor that piece of code. As in like you have a function which just calculates the sum of the two numbers. So instead of depending on other classes or maybe other variables, you can write that function such a way that if tomorrow a requirement comes, like okay, I want the multiplication of two numbers, so you just have to make a copy of that function and just change a few bit of like operators. So what you can do is you can design a function which says calculate variables or calculate numbers, and then you can pass like two variables and one operators. So in that case, what will happen is tomorrow any operation comes up, you can easily refactor your code. So you just have to make a function call by passing some new operators. So that is about the maintainable code. The fourth part is tested. So generally, like as a developer, like whenever a developer start his app development journey, or maybe when I started, I never used to write test cases. I used to prefer doing a manual testing, or maybe asking my friend to just test out the app. But what if you do well test cases? So in Android, generally, if you are separating your UI logic and the business logic, what you can do is you can write unit test for your code. So suppose you have a function which calculates the number. So you can write a unit test for that function, that class, and then you can be sure that okay, my code is well tested. So there are no chances of breaking up. Then that comes the refactor. So generally refactoring is the thing which the developer avoids once the testing is done, or maybe once the code is submitted, or once the application is published. But refactoring is also an important part of your clean code writing structure. So why it is important? So once you have written the function, you should always think, okay, can I optimize it more? Or you have created a class, you should be thinking like, okay, can I break down these classes into subclasses, or maybe divide them into some other classes? Or maybe you have written a while loop, can you replace that while loop with something for loop, or maybe some other conditions? So you should always think of refactoring. Then comes the solid principle. So solid principles generally you can refer on the internet as well, and you can read about, because it is a really interesting and deep topic. So generally what solid principle means, in short, if I give you an overview, so S stands for like single responsibility function or classes. So whenever you are building an application, the function or the class should have the responsibility only that much which has been given to the class. Maybe you are developing an app which has a calculator, you are writing a function to sum up the two variables. So now your function should not update the UI. Okay, like you are passing two variables and then you are doing a set text in that function. So that is not recommended. So what your function says, you should be doing that. So that is all like you will learn in this solid principle thing. Then you can also follow some OOPS, which is object oriented like programming structure, which we studied, the four fundamental soft OOPS which we can follow. So like when you are writing a class, you should always divide into small pieces, which we call it abstraction. Like you should break down in all the things. Then you should use inheritance, you should use interfaces wherever required and possible. So that will avoid rewriting or repeating your code. Instead, you will be doing a reusing of code. So that is about the clean code. So it is simple, like any fool can write a code that a computer can understand, but good programmers write code that humans can understand as well. So like when you're working independently, no one is going to read your code, or maybe no one is going to review it. But while working in a company, your colleague, your teammate would be referring or would be seeing your code. Your senior manager would be reviewing it. So you have to write such code that is understandable by your manager, right, as a term like humans as well. So let's see how to do a clean code in a simple and easiest way. So first is meaningful names. So whenever we are declaring some variables, we should be name them as their job, or maybe as their things which they are doing. What happens generally when you define a variable? You simply define like temp, or you define as ABC, or you define like string as string one, string two. So that should not be happening while defining the variable. You should write meaningful name. Suppose you are defining a string which has the name value. So you will write name, or you will like name string or name value. Then you will also follow the pattern which we use, or maybe like practices which we use while declaring a variable. Like variable name should always start with a small letter, so you should be following that. Again, then functions, as we discussed, your function should be named well, like whatever the function job is, it should do that. Then comes the classes. So classes, the name should always start with the capital letter. So that should be the case while writing the classes. Package, while making an Android application, you have data classes, you have the different utilities, like you write a function where your app checks the internet. So you wrote a class where it says check internet, and it has a static function which says is connecting or something like that. So what you can do is you can structure them into package, like you can structure your activities into UI or package. Then you can structure your data classes in model or data, naming the package. Then you have the source file, like whenever you are like referring or writing down some source file, you should be giving the proper name, directory name, in case you are or like including any directories in your application. Then it comes the classes. So in classes, it is recommended to have a small piece of code, like whatever the class job is, it should have only that piece of code. And you should always break down your classes, and it should be loosely coupled. This term would be difficult for you to understand for now, but what loosely coupled mean is like the responsibility of classes should be more independent and should not be dependent on other classes. Suppose you make a classes which calculates the variable. So now you have two classes which passes the number, then you have one classes which will do the calculation. So now it would be independent. So in case you are writing a test case for calculating your numbers, you can directly make a call to that classes. Or maybe you are just testing out whether your class is able to receive the number, or whether it is able to return the values or not. You would be easily able to do that. So and also when you implement of like high level structure, or maybe some dependency injection thing, this would be definitely helpful. So as a starting, you should always start with writing a small classes. It is okay if you divide in them multiple classes, or you have many classes in your app, but it should be loosely coupled and it should be independent, such that if you are running unit test on your single class, it should be able to do without the dependency of other classes. Functions, as we discussed, it should be small and should do only things as their name says. Then this is one of the important part, but many of us miss out, or maybe we don't follow a proper comments, like what we are doing. So in comments, you should always write some meaningful comment. So what does this mean? So if your function is doing the calculation of two variables, and it is saying that, okay, get sum of two variables, or get sum of variables, then there is no need of writing that, okay, this function will give you a sum of a and b. So this is like the function was self explanatory. Instead, you should write some warning, or maybe something like conditions, like in case you are passing some negative value or float, then you should write the comment, pass the integer number or pass the positive value. So such meaningful comments are appreciated. So this was a simple example, but in case when you are building an application which is having the internet or API calls, you should mention that, okay, what this API will return, or what does this status means, like you will be having status code 1 2 3, something like that. So 1 means sometime that success, 2 means like it fails, 3 means like data not available. So you should write down those comments wherever it's required. Then it part is error handling. When you make a simple application, you generally don't worry about the null check, or you are using some Firebase services, or maybe you are using some third-party APIs, and you are not doing a proper validation with the API. So sometimes you might not aware, but the server of that API is down, and you will be getting some uh, response code as in like server not available, and you might have not handled it. So what will happen? That will result eventually your application would be crashing. Or maybe you have written the data classes where your API would be getting some list of users. But what if you haven't checked for null check, like the email ID is not available for some users, and you have just implemented and you are trying to uh, print or maybe trying to set the value of that email in your view? What will happen? That will eventually crash your application. Again, the internet check this function call you haven't made, then what will happen is, if user has disabled his internet and he would be making some API call, your app will crash, since no internet connectivity is there. So you should always keep this track of error handling, and that doesn't mean you should always write a try catch or keep a exception, like wherever you are thinking, like wherever you are facing some problem, like you are getting lazy. So what you will do is you will simply add a try catch. So try catch is generally not a good practice. You should always rectify where your error is coming from, and then you can keep a if condition, or maybe some in Kotlin, if you are using, you can keep a let, or maybe you can have this non-null value conditions. So you can specify that. So that is all about the clean code. Now let's talk about the architecture. uh, I guess, like, as you have all started with Android, uh, you might not be able to, uh, catch up with this thing, or you might be able to understand few of the things, which is totally fine. In case you will have any doubt or anything, you can just put in comment section whenever something comes up to your mind. I will try to answer all of them at the end of session. So, if in Android, when you are starting with Kotlin or even with Java, the basic recommended architecture is Mvvm. So, Mvvm, you can refer to the Android's official documentation. You can visit different Medium blogs and watch YouTube videos. You will be able to learn about Mvvm in deep. But let's break down in Mvvm what does exactly it means. So, since Android started in the early days, there was no architecture pattern people were following. So generally, there were most of the developers who switched from Java to they already knew Java. So what they did, they started Android. So now most of the developers were aware of MVC pattern, that is Model View Controller pattern. So they started structuring app in that way. Then later, the developers found that okay, we should be having a better architecture. They came up with the MVP. So different developers, different architecture were being used, and none of them were the at that level of development, or maybe that would be very easy to understand to new people and would be better in case of Android development. But none of the architecture were able to do such thing. So then Google started working on it, and later the developer also adapted this architecture, which is MVPN. So what does the MVVM stands for? So MVVM stands for model, view model. So now you see there are three parts. One is the model, the other is view, and the last part is view model. So what does that mean? So generally, whenever you are doing some execution, or maybe you are doing some functional call or some API call, there would be three stages generally where it would be happening. So one would be you are making a functional call by making some click of a button or something like that, and that will eventually fetch the data from API, or maybe that will get the data from your local source, or maybe you are doing some calculation. So that is your logic part. So in like tech terms, we generally say it as business logic. So that is your logic part of your application, where it is doing some operations, some calculations, such that. And then you have your UI. So whatever you have processed your data, you will eventually displaying that thing to the user. because that's your final output. So what does the MVVM do is like view would be the same, your UI or XML, where you are setting or doing some or showing your data, and then or maybe you click off a button, then you will fire your business logic call. So suppose your logic has to get the data, whether we will not consider from where you are getting for now, but you want some data. So now you will ask your view model, okay, brother, give me this data or maybe a list of users. Your view model will give you a list of users which you will display in your list. So that's a simple understanding. So previously, what you were doing is you were writing a code of getting users in your activity only. But now what you will do, you will move that piece of code into your view model, and you will attach some live data to that so that you are able to automatically observe that data whenever something or anything is changed in that data. What is live data? I won't be going that much deep, but in short, if I explain you what is live data, it is generally observable data where you observe your list or maybe you observe your data. Whenever something has been changed to that data, you automatically gets the update instead of again and again calling your functional calls. So this is your view. This is your view model. Now there comes your data source. So as I mentioned, your data source can be remote or local. But in Android, since we have this Android app, so it is recommended you should also support the offline structure for your app. So maybe you should cache your data in your local room database, or if it is small data, you can keep it in shared preference or any other third party like database. You can implement it in your application. So that is the repository part where you get your data. That can be from a local source or maybe from your remote source, or maybe both of them. Like you have first you are getting it from local data, and then you are so in background you are updating your local data from your remote. So eventually it will update your view model and you will get your fresh data. So this is about the architecture in very short. So my purpose of adding this architecture in this talk was to make you understand what is architecture, and you should be able to getting started with your basic application. Even you are making a small application, even your calculator app. I want like if you guys start using this architecture, it would be good as you eventually grow in your app development journey. And then comes the other part, which generally you might have not explored yet, but that is the testing testing. And so testing, like whenever your architecture you are using this MVVM, you should be using the, or maybe you should be writing the test cases. So in Android project, I was not able to demonstrate here now, but if you visit your Android project, you will have this package file like Java, and you will also have one package called test. So if you go that to the Android test package, you will see that there are some default very basic test classes written. So you can write your, you can start writing your test cases there. So if you see this pyramid, you can see the unit tests are very like largely or maybe very in sizing are wide. So what does that mean is unit test, as we mentioned, you should write your small classes. Dedicated functions. So what you will do is you will write test cases for every class. So like your each small pieces of code will have a unit test. So one unit test will pass one class, other will pass other, and such that your whole class structure would be getting the 100% passing result. In case anything fails, you will be able to refactor your code instead of debugging it at later level. So you would be able to do that from the starting phase. Then comes the integration test. So integration test is generally like when you are integrating the couple of modules, or maybe you are debugging your code at the feature level. So that would be your integration test. So once you are confident about unit test, you can move to integration test. When you have done with the integration test, you can move to UI test. Generally, UI test is done by your QA in your company, or maybe your teammates, or maybe some companies they also release for alpha beta testing directly for users. So UI tests can be done by the any stakeholders. So this is about the testing. So you can start writing very basic test cases like click of a button, or maybe is my activity visible, is my view visible, such that you can start by writing down your test cases. There are a lot of articles on testing, and also you can refer to code labs. In Udacity also you have this free courses for testing, so you can refer that as well. So this is what happens in testing. Now, what about the post development? Since your development work has been done, you have submitted your project, everything is done. But in enterprise level or in an industrial journey, what happens after the development? Your code review starts, which is a really very horrible for you. Like, you are always nervous and you are always worrying. Okay, what if error comes up? Because if error comes up, you have to rewrite your whole code. And like I remember, like when I had my first code review, I had to rebuild that whole feature for next like 20 days. I had already spent a lot of time. I have to rework on that. So that is the code review. So what happens in code reviews? So your senior manager, or maybe your teammate or your colleague will review your code, and they will try to understand the logic of your code, or maybe the uh, intent behind your code, like why you have wrote this function, why you have declared this variable, why you have not made this classes private, why your this function is public, why you have doing calculation in activity fragment and not doing in view model. Everything comes up, and why you have not written unit test, and then you have to answer it everything. So what happens, like your code does not get deployed directly. Your code gets merged to a local branch, or maybe a development branch, which is the testing, or just being meant for development, not the production. So your code is still in development branch. So before merging your code into the production branch, as in GitHub, I'm talking about. So they would be checking everything, and in case anything is missing, you will have to refactor your code. And in case if you are doing refactoring and everything works, then your code is released for the users. And once it is released, you will have to make a documentation of that feature you have worked on, because uh, to maybe tomorrow you want to do a walkthrough of what you had developed, or maybe you want to uh, give that piece of code to the newly joined developer, or you want to give some knowledge training to any person. You would be able to do that with this documentation. So you will write down the documentation, why you have used this function, and what does this class do, and then you will explain everything about the feature in that documentation. So that is the post development journey. So what you can do, I will explain how you can do with your personal app, while just making it a small application. Even you can do those things, so I will guide you through that. And last thing in enterprise, which I wanted to mention, comes up is app support and customization. So generally in material UI guidelines, and in Android, since in dark mode came up, the dual theming, which is like dark light theme support, is recommended in building your application, because your user might be using the application at evening or night time, so their eye shouldn't get that strain, and your app should have those support of good colors and everything. Then multilingual, in case multi-language application, like you are designing an app for the pan India level. So you should be at least adding primary language. Like you would be doing it in English, but you should also have your app in Hindi. So for that, you will need string resources. So you can define that. So that you can do it. So that is also generally done in the companies. And then comes the sprint resolution. Since Android is open source, and there are billions of devices, like from 3 inch to 6 inch to tablet to some people even run on their Chromebooks and many stuff. So you have to make sure that your app supports all of the screen sizes. So for that, what you can do is you can go with constraint layout. You can use different like device support like LDPI, MDPI, such kind of resolution. Or you can also add like for orientation, you can keep landscape and portrait orientation layouts. So that would be also nice. You can create a tab layout separately. So that can help you. Then there is a user factors. Generally, you won't be carrying if you are making a small app, but again at an industrial level, the app is targeted to a particular audience. Like in my current company, we are making an application for teachers. So our aim is to make a very simple app, and with big buttons and bold letters, so teacher are able to easily use the application. If you are making an app for youngsters, you can have to make it energetic. You have to use like highlighting colors, and you have to add animations, motions. So that is all the factors which the companies also supports. And before we release the application, like after the development and everything has been done, uh, generally we keep a track of what our application is supposed to use. Like we make it in a multi-module application. Like in Paytm, if you go and try out like after the session, like if you try out something like Paytm Mall on their Paytm application. It will take a few minutes and it will show like updating the app or something like that. So what happens? It dynamically downloads a module, uh, which eventually will reduce the app sizes. So like while publishing the APK, there might be some features which are supposed to use later by user, or maybe some users are only going to use it. So you could break it down in multi-module application. But that was the one aspect. Other aspect would be you are working since you are working in a team. So each individual has an individual module and responsibility. So if I make everything in a single structure or single module, what will happen is uh, while pushing the code or maybe while merging the code, I will get many conflicts. So it's better I keep my module separate and other person keeps his module separate. So that is the multi-module structure we follow. Then comes the product flavors. Generally, product flavors are in simple terms, I will explain. So, if you have used the MX Player application, it shows you the ads and it shows you many pop-ups and everything. But if you use MX Player Pro version, it won't show you ad. So now, what do you think? Like the developer would have be maintaining two code bases, like one for like free MX Player, one for Pro MX Player. No, what they would do is they will define product flavors in the Gradle. So you can just keep in your mind or note it down somewhere, and then you can after the session you can read about the product flavors. So similarly, we also use product flavors generally for dev testing and the production testing, because in developer phase we don't have or maybe we don't need a big server for our app. Like we need a small app server or maybe a very cheap server, and for production we need a high server, like maybe we are using some Amazon web services. So both of them separate. Maybe also we are using some testing emails for our developer environment, and we are using some other email for production environment. So that is separated using product flavors. Then comes the APK size. Your APK size should be small as possible. So for that, what you can do is you can remove the unwanted class or maybe third-party libraries which are not that useful, like for showing a you know, simple loading or maybe progress bar. You are using a library which has like 80 to 90 or 100 progress bar variants. So now you are using only one progress bar and you are integrating or implementing whole library. So that will increase your app size. So you should always use a very, like before any, like implementing any dependencies in your project, you should always think, do you really need the such dependencies? And then comes the ProGuard. So ProGuard, if you have in your Gradle file, you might have read this line: Minify enabled true, something like that. So what does this ProGuard does is ProGuard will help your project to reduce in size, also preventing reverse engineering. So generally, what happens? There are some hackers, or maybe there are some people who can reverse your project and can see all your code. But if you enable ProGuard in your application, they might not be able to easily reverse it. They can still do it, but it will be a difficult job for them, because the ProGuard will rename your classes into some random string variables. Like if you have a class, say user, so it will rename to DBA856 something, any random thing. So your even your person who is trying to crack your application would not be easily able to do that. So that is the ProGuard thing. So you can also read about ProGuard. It is very useful since it reduces your app size. So do check out that as well. So now, as I mentioned, I would also be guiding like how you can start with the best practices from day one of your app development journey. So since I am also mentoring the like TSC students for the Android Study Jam. So what I have done is I have in the first session only I have taught them how they can put their project on GitHub. So you can do this way. What you can do is you start with some application, any basic application, like even a to-do app. And what you can do is you can open source it. Then you can request your peers, maybe your friends, for code reviews. Like okay, can or maybe your seniors, or maybe your faculties if they are available, or maybe you are active on Twitter or any platform. You can ask the good developers like hey, can you do a code review for me? So what will happen, that will give you a better understanding of what you have written in your code. And also, if you are making a good open source application, there are chances that people from across the globe will be using your app, and they will see your code, and maybe they will comment like, hey, this is not a good thing, or maybe they will request some changes in your code. So this will help you eventually. So I always recommend like start with the open source application, then do a pair programming. Since you are working on a small project, at least the thing like you won't have any teammate or colleagues or anyone. So what you can do is you can ask your friend with who has the same type of interest, or maybe likes to do coding just like you. Ask them to join in your pair programming session and start coding together. Like both of them think of a class. Okay, we want this in our project, and we want to show a uh, list of GitHub users in my app. So how can we do it? So now both of you will do a brainstorming. Like you will say recycler view, one will say list view, one will say this adapter, one will say that adapter, and then you will come to a point. Okay, this is the best practice, and then your pair programming will eventually also make you an effective team member. Then the third thing is ask yourself every time you write a function class, ask yourself, is it correct? Can I refactor it? Can I reduce it? Or do I have to rename it? Is it the name is sensible? Such thing you should always ask yourself. Then for all the top three things, if you want to do well, it is always read good code. Go check out the GitHub repositories, read Medium articles, follow code labs, and start reading the good code. Because until and unless you don't read other developers' code, or maybe who are seniors in your field, then you won't be able to write good code. Because if you read like thousands of articles, like okay, this are the solid principle, this is the object-oriented structure, everything is good, but what if you don't know how to implement in your project, and you are just following some basic tutorials, or maybe taking some session or classes with from your mentors and everything, but at least you will have to visit those repositories which have a large source of articles. Like there are many application on GitHub. Like generally I like this, there is a news application uh, which is made in Android Kotlin, and it has everything, dependency injections and everything. So you can go check out such application. Then you should always keep some good books with you. If you have a habit of reading books, you should read the books related to Kotlin. You should read like books related to plain code and refactoring, etc. So you should stay up to date with those things. So you should have a good habit of reading the books. Then when you are starting an application, always keep a deadline. So this will give you a good habit of setting a deadline, and also giving an estimating estimation to yourself. What happens in a development, when we get a feature in company, we have to give a deadline. Okay, I will require 2 days of work. 2 days means 8 into 8, that is 16 hours. Like we work 8 hours a day. So you have to give such deadlines to yourself, so that you won't be procrastinating, or you would be acting lazy, and you would be uh, dedicating yourself, like, okay, I have to cover up this deadline. So that will help you to complete the deadlines and do a good time management from the start of your career. Then I would recommend always join communities. Since this is the DSC, you are a part of DSC communities. Once you have passed out, and you are into the development journey, you are working in a company, or maybe you are in Mumbai or Bangalore, anywhere, find a local community and start attending their meetups and events. If you are in Mumbai, I would encourage you to join Kotlin Mumbai, which is a JetBrains community. So what you will learn here is you will learn everything about Kotlin. We keep interacting session with Kotlin, and we get good mentors and speakers across the uh, globe who are good in Kotlin, and we choose some interesting topic, and we come up with a new topic every month. So such communities, you should always be a part of the communities. Then learn the version controlling system, which is like GitHub commands and versioning. How you can structure your branches, how you can merge your code with. So while doing pair programming, what you can do is you can keep a two separate branch, like one branch for you and one for your friend, like uh, my local branch or maybe my friend branch, and then you can merge it someday when you have done with the feature. So that will give you the idea how GitHub works. Then start writing test cases, unit test and UI testing. So that is about the best practices. Some other skills which I wanted to share with you is always keep a good effective communication skills, because when you would be in a meeting, or maybe in a discussion, you should be able to raise your point, or maybe you should be able to share your thoughts. So there should be a effective communication skill in you. Ideation and mentorship. You always, it is good to have a good coding ideal. It can be any developer, even you don't know him. In Android, many people, consider Jack Walton as their ideals, because he has done a lot of good development work in his entire journey. So you can find a good coding ideal, then find a mentor to guide you. Like even in your company, keep a one person who can help you. Like as an internship, you definitely need a mentor. So same way, when you grow as a junior developer, senior developer, you will always need a person who can guide you through the journey. So always try to keep a ideal and mentor. And since coding is not for your academics or for your job, it is about like learning for life. So even you get a job as an Android developer in a very, very big company, but you will always have to keep learning, because in Android, every like now and then a new thing comes up. Till now we were doing the UI in XML. Now the Jetpack Compose is coming. So you have to also stay up to date with those technologies. So as in panel discussion, it was mentioned that in India people are still using Java, and they are not, moving to Kotlin. The reason is the same. They are not able to learn the new language, so they are still sticking with Java. So if you don't want it, it could happen with you. What you can do is you can keep learning new technology, new language, a new skill. You are into development. You can learn about management, you can learn about project, or you can learn about the UI UX. Anything, just keep learning. So that is the some bonus and additional skill set which I wanted you guys to start cultivating in yourself. So with that, I come to the end of my session. So that is all I wanted to share. So now, if you have any questions or anything, you can just uh, post in the chat, or maybe you have already posted. Let's go through some questions. Okay. So first question here comes up is how to make my own apps. Like I usually refer some other sources while developing, but can we really make our own, unlike completely for app development and totally dependent on resources? Uh, yes, you can make your own application. So, see, if you don't know much about the uh, like backend, if you want to write your own application or own backend and you don't know, you can go with the Firebase real-time database, or maybe you can go with the Firestore thing. And in case you know a bit of JavaScript, what you can do is you can build your APIs in Node.js. So that will help you in defining or creating your own backend. And in case you are thinking about like you want to do something at your own, definitely you can do it. What you can do is you can share your project idea. Like suppose in COVID, there were many people who started making this COVID tracker app. So I have seen that there were individuals who were helping in UI, some were doing coding, and etc. So this was happening in pandemic. So you can do something like that. You can post your idea on Twitter or maybe in your college WhatsApp group and ask if anyone is interested. So that you might find a person who is good in backend. So you can take his help and you can tell him that we are doing it open source. So since you are making an open source, that will help building your own portfolio and his as well. So that can definitely help. So like you would be eventually independent on resources. Like generally, if you think of making an app, what you will do is you will refer some API which are available, but instead you can create your own. You can have your own backend in Firebase, which is really easy to start developing in Firebase application, which is also free for a limit. So if you are using real-time database, even like for 500 to 1000 users, I don't think you would be have to pay anything. So that is you can do, or you can also make your application with local room database, like offline application, like some codes or something. So you can do and implement all those things. So that is you can do. And while publishing the app, you can also buy a developer's account, like which cost around $15 something, which is roughly 2500 in Indian currency. So you can what you can do is you can take a 4 to 5 people, you can divide that amount, and you can have your own developer console, and you can start publishing app for the users. Okay, then thank you guys. I will. I just wanted to share one thing. Uh, programming is like 10% of writing code and 90% of understanding why it's not working. It's just thought. So whenever you are getting stuck in your development journey, don't just give up. Try debugging your code, try refactoring it, and try to find the exact solution for your application. And so that is like I wanted to share with you guys. So that is all about the coding, and thank you for joining. Uh, you were a nice audience, and in case if you have any doubt or you want to get in touch, you can visit my website, which is chintan.app, or you can visit my Twitter handle or LinkedIn, where my username is Chintan R. Parmar, and I can definitely help you out in your development journey in case you need any mentoring or support. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you so much for these untold insights, sir, and for your valuable time. I also thank Ishaan and Jaydeep for taking out their time and attending the session to share their experiences. Thank you so much, audience, for attending today's session. This session will be available on the YouTube channels of all the 7 DSC collaborating DSCs. Keep building, so till the time, keep building amazing apps. Thank you.